In this chapter, what we now are looking at, to be able to look at financial institutions and financial markets, we need to basically spend an entire chapter talking about what is money. You may have talked about this, hopefully you talked about it in Econ 131, the Principles of Macroeconomics course. If you've taken intermediate macroeconomics, Econ 301, you would have talked about it. So for some of you, hopefully all of you, this will be a review, and if not, it shouldn't be too difficult. Again, I'm going to just skip over things that you can read and you don't need me to read for you. Money can be anything. It truly can be anything. The only thing that money really truly needs to do is just be a generally acceptable means of trade. Meaning that it needs to be something readily acceptable to either party in a market transaction. Dollars matter in the United States. You can, if you have cash in your hands, you can pretty much buy anything you want. Transactions are pretty smooth. As opposed to, right, the popular thing these days is Bitcoin. If I had Bitcoin in my digital wallet and I wanted to buy something, I would have a lot more difficulty buying whatever it is I want to buy. Although, as I say that, I can think of markets where US dollars would be not preferred and Bitcoin would be preferred, right? I mean, again, I don't buy these kinds of products, right? But you could imagine, right, like in black markets, illicit markets, illegal goods markets. Let's just take a pretty innocent one. Let's say I want to buy big fireworks in Honolulu, right, which are illegal. If I want to buy big fireworks, I probably don't want to use cash. It could somehow be traced back to me, or a check, or a credit card. I probably want to use Bitcoin because it can't be traced back to me. For the most part, we are not engaging in such kinds of markets. So for the most part, we all are pretty happy dealing with US dollars. In other countries of the world, there's usually a home currency that's readily acceptable, but also US dollars are probably also readily acceptable because many merchants would accept that dollar, and you would find that many consumers can use those dollars. So it becomes money. The US dollar becomes money around the world because it is generally acceptable around the world to use for goods, services, and the repayments of debts. Money can exist in two forms. It can either be a stock or a flow variable. As a flow variable, that would be income, right? That would be the amount I collect per day, per month, per year. And I spend money to consume, to live, but then I also probably save something, and that savings accumulates over time to be my stock variable, which would be wealth. Again, this right here, that medium of exchange, is by far the most important function that money serves. The reason why it's so important, the reason why money in general is so important, is because in pre-money times, we had to barter for everything. And so as we bartered for everything, you'd have to find actors who were willing to accept what you had to offer. In colonial America, before money came to exist, it was known as country pay. right? That farmers, which was what was in most of the colonial economy of the day, it would be like eggs or horse meat or milk, right? Pick your agricultural product. And if I'm a doctor and I'm coming to your house to like cure you of an illness, dude, I got lots of eggs because all of my patients are paying me in eggs. You see the problem? I want cash that I can use to buy things that farmers can't grow. And so the U.S. colonial economy suffered by not having money for the most part. The British wouldn't allow the British pound to be used in the United States or the colonies. And so the colonies ended up using the Spanish currency, which was used in Mexico. And the Spaniards had no problem with us using their currency in colonial America. And the Spanish currency, because it's also known as the dolare, or dollar as we know it, and hence we get the term dollar. That dollar used to be split up into eighths, which was known as a bit. So it was about 12.5 cents. Then Ben Franklin, as our country was being formed, decided that it would be a lot, and Thomas Jefferson decided that it would be easier to understand a dollar if we divided it into tens, right? So 10, 20, etc., or by fives, right? A multiple of 5, which is generally how we understand the U.S. dollar and how it's divided. The benefit that the introduction of money, which basically in the United States goes back to the beginning of the country, the benefit that the introduction of money had is that it allows for specialization. Because without money, I might have to do everything myself because I don't know for certain if I'm going to be able to trade it for what I need. Right? I'm a professor. I focus on economics. I can do that and not have to know how to landscape, how to do plumbing, do electrical work, fly an airplane, right? Name all these different things. I don't have to know how to do any of those things because I always know I can pay someone money to do those things for me. And the counter. My electrician doesn't need to know any economics. The pilot doesn't need to know any economics. I got that covered. But I'm not going to give my economics to the electrician for the electrician to do their job. Because it would take a really weird electrician to accept payment in economics lectures. And I might not even get the electrician that I want the best. And money, the existence of some generally acceptable means of exchange, the existence of money encourages people to specialize, where they can then charge for their services in dollars. What makes the US dollar so useful in the United States as a form of money are these last characteristics here. It is standardized. We all know what a dollar looks like. It is widely accepted. It is divisible into coins and big dollars, right? Large denomination dollar bills are divisible into smaller denomination bills. It's relatively easy to carry and it doesn't deteriorate quickly. Some countries do this better than others. So the Canadian currency, for instance, has a lot of the same divisibility features that the US dollar has, except the Canadian currency is actually made of plastic. So it really does not deteriorate quickly. It is widely accepted within Canada, but pretty much not outside of Canada. So In Canada, the Canadian dollar is a good medium of exchange. In the United States, the Canadian dollar is not a good medium of exchange. And while many merchants in Canada would accept the US dollar, certainly not all of them would. And that would obviously mean that the US dollar is certainly not a perfect medium of exchange in Canada. Other features that money must serve is that it serves as a unit of account, meaning it's what we put our prices in, right? That there's a dollar sign in front of them. And that it stores its value well. By that we mean inflation deteriorates the value of the currency over time. Because the United States has such low inflation, individuals know that the US dollar is going to retain its value over time. I was in Zimbabwe in the year 2000. And right at that time, Mugabe, who was the leader of Zimbabwe, was he was taking land from one class of individuals and giving it to others. People got really upset about it, not only within Zimbabwe, but in other countries. Because he wasn't being very kind, obviously, to the population. So he was, killing people, hurting people, and he was stealing land from some and giving it to others. But also Mugabe had been running the country for like decades, so it was like his own personal bank account. Well, Zimbabwe ran into a problem around the year 2000. It's that they had these really high bills, but they had no way to pay them as the government. So Mugabe decided that they were just going to print a bunch. Their currency was also known as the Zimbabwean dollar. They decided to print a bunch of Zimbabwean dollars. So much so that in that time, in the early 2000s, they had the highest inflation rate in the world. Now, when I was there in 2000, it was just sort of beginning. But certainly the Zimbabwean dollars I had were not incredibly useful. Everyone wanted dollars from me, US dollars from me. Because even though it was Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean dollars had lost their ability to store value over time. And so as a result, US dollars went much, much further. In fact, the neighboring country to Zimbabwe, Mozambique, which was my ultimate destination, they had the Mozambique metica, right? That was that currency. That currency was more accepted in Zimbabwe than the Zimbabwean dollar. So it wasn't just US dollar is great. The Mozambique metica was better. The South African rand was much better than the Zimbabwean dollar because it could not use its store value function anymore. Mugabe then passes a law saying you can't use other currencies, but by the time you do that, every transaction just goes underground once you start telling people what they can and cannot use. If we look at, and I don't mean to keep talking about this topic, but it at least seems relevant here. Because at least once a month, someone asks me what I think about Bitcoin. And I don't own any. I don't hope to own any ever. I don't know what I would do with it if I did own it. I don't buy the exciting stuff you can use with Bitcoin. My problem with Bitcoin is it doesn't fit any of these three functions. Again, I don't deal with markets where the merchant wouldn't accept something other than Bitcoin. They usually accept US dollars, and I'm totally fine paying for things in US dollars. It has sufficiently specialized me as a worker. It's not widely accepted. It is divisible. In fact, the Bitcoin is probably more divisible than a dollar, right? Because you see all those like point dot dot dot, right? All those numbers. It is easy to carry because it is a digital wallet. Doesn't deteriorate quickly. It doesn't. It doesn't deteriorate at all. So it certainly has some of these things, but it's not widely accepted. And the other problem I guess we have with this is that cryptocurrencies, which all employ a blockchain technology of some kind, there's certainly a lot of options out there right now, and so you don't have a lot of standardization. Certainly not a unit of account in anything I buy. I don't buy anything that's only listed in Bitcoin. And also, and I think this one's also very important for Bitcoin, it doesn't store its value well. At one point, a Bitcoin's worth, right at the beginning of the pandemic, a Bitcoin was, if my memory serves me right, it was about like $9,000, I think. Let's see what it was. It's about $9,000. Yeah, approximately. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was about $9,000. And then 58,000, 61,000, 55,000. Now it's down to 37,000. Even if we look at it over the past 5 days, it's gone from 38,000 to over 40,000, down to below 34,000. Dude, I mean, I don't know. It's not storing its value very well. It's hard for me as a person, if I owned Bitcoin, to be able to rely on this value over any period of time. Money, what is money, has evolved over time and has shifted from being a commodity to a fiat. So the oldest forms of money were linked to gold and silver. Even here in the United States, the biggest debate when money was introduced in the United States was whether we were going to have a gold standard or a silver standard. And like any good politician, they just said, fuck if we know, why don't we just pick both? So we actually had a bimetallic standard. We had a gold standard for large transactions and a silver standard for everyday transactions. That silver was contained in the coins. So any really, really old coin that you buy from like the 1700s or 1800s as a collectible, the value of it is that it has silver within it. Or you could buy gold coins. It's standardized. A coin, the beauty of a coin is that it is standardized in weight and whatnot, its contents. It is divisible. Big coins can be turned into smaller coins. And the reason why the coins can be a commodity money again is that the metal actually in the coin is the thing of value. As opposed to today, where the quarter that's minted today is a fiat money. The dime. Let's just look at the dime. So the metal in the dime is a copper-nickel mix weighing 2.268 grams. And the metal in a dime is about 24% of what a dime is worth. So it's about 2.5 cents to make a dime, I guess, is the value of that coin. This would be from before coins dimes don't have silver anymore. I think 64. Yeah, 65. I wasn't off that much one year. So we know that there are, right, so this is why people are probably paying so much for this dime, in part because it contains silver, but there's probably also some special features about this coin. The money we have today is all fiat money. The value of the US dollar all comes from the fact that all comes from this line right here. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That line right there. That is what gives this $100 bill all of its value. Those two lines. That one sentence. Because it all comes from the fact that it's basically U.S. law that you can use U.S. dollars to pay for debts. All debts, public and private. This is the one where, like, you know, every year someone comes about and gets really grumpy, you know, with like a parking ticket and decides to pay it in pennies. Technically speaking, no law has been broken. There was this one car dealer paid in. There was a story that, like, about like half a year ago or so. Or actually not even half a year ago, just a few weeks ago. Sorry, I don't know, it's half a year ago. This guy got, like, quit his job, and he was paid $915 in pennies. There's like a picture, yeah, here it is. Where the guy, right, I mean, look on the internet, people do really dumb things with, seems like the only value of pennies is people doing stupid things. That would be what it looks like here. You can use pennies to do what you want. Oh, here's the one where the guy, yeah, you got paid in pennies. Technically, though, something was done against the law here. I guess the dealer put like an oily substance on the pennies, and that is illegal. You can't deface the U.S. dollar or U.S. coins. So, right, so if you add a mustache to a U.S. dollar to give Ben Franklin or George Washington or whoever a mustache, technically you're breaking the law. Okay. All countries in the world today use a fiat money. There's no country I can think of that uses a gold standard or silver standard for everyday transactions. Money, the problem with dollars, right? I mean, sometimes I tell people, like, if you open up my wallet, there's like nothing in it. There's no coins in it. There's no bills in it, or very little bills in it. Primarily because most of us, I'm sure, you know, carry a debit card, carry a credit card. Credit cards are going to be different than a debit card. But let's just say I did everything with my debit card. It's basically an electronic way to access my dollars, right, that are held at the bank. I have a checking account, right, with checks. Another way to access the dollars so that I don't have to actually carry dollars. Now, the thing is that with these like ACH payments, like electronic pay, electronic forms of money like a debit card, and even checks, that's all considered basically US dollars. That's all considered money, just being used, converted, transferred in a different way, an electronic way that might be faster and safer, more secure. But it's still money, and that payment system is evolving. I used to, my first job out of college was with the Federal Reserve Bank, and I worked at the 7th District. That's the district in Chicago. And the way that the Federal Reserve made money at that time, was by processing checks. The Federal Reserve would make about 87 cents per check processed. So for every check written, basically local banks would pay the Federal Reserve about 87 cents to basically organize the checks so that people's accounts were being debited and credited in the right way. And even in the 7th District, we had a check processing facility in Des Moines, Iowa, one in Peoria, one in Detroit, one in Milwaukee, and then we did it in Chicago. So we had 5 offices that basically collected checks, scanned them, did the necessary accounting methods, and then sent the checks back to the bank. And we made 87.5 cents a check. Today, there is only one check processing facility in the entire United States, and that's in Atlanta. So the payment system in the United States is dramatically different, even in the 15 years since I've been at the Federal Reserve. And the way that the Federal Reserve makes money now has to be different. It cannot rely on check processing to do that anymore. The question then might lead from that is, are we headed towards a cashless society where everything is just electronic? It's certainly going to be used more, and I don't want to kind of give my opinion here because we can all have different opinions. I still write a lot of checks, and maybe you don't write as many checks, but I mean, sometimes it's just a good practice to write checks because you have a paper record that something was paid, and so when I make my mortgage payments, for instance, I don't do electronic transfer, because what if it doesn't work out for whatever reason? If I write out a check, I take that check to the bank, I know that it's going to be processed, and it's going to say received on such and such a date. Then if something goes wrong, dude, I got a canceled check. It shows that I paid whatever it is I paid, right? Rather than me forgetting to click confirm, and then all of a sudden my mortgage didn't get paid that month. Now, granted, it's not entirely convenient. I have to walk, into the branch, or I have to go to the ATM to do the transaction. And I'm sure some people would think I'm crazy for doing that, but maybe as I get older, maybe I'll just be like, fuck it, like ACH is okay with me. Electronic transfer is okay with me. But not yet. And right now I just started paying my son allowance. And I don't think he'd really want me to pay him electronically. I think he wants to see the cash. And I take that back. He would want Robux, probably. That's the currency in the Roblox game. He probably would take Robux, but he wanted cash. He doesn't want a transfer to his bank account from my bank account. I'm not even sure what to say beyond this. I don't want to read this because this is even from 2019, and even the nature of Bitcoin has changed a great deal since then. Let's just talk about what Bitcoin is, though, very briefly, just so we're all on the same page. As I understand it, Bitcoin is earned when your computer solves a really complicated math equation. To solve that math equation takes an incredible amount of computing power, which in turn uses a lot of electricity. But because it is so difficult for the computer to solve that math problem, and it takes that single computer so long, the idea is that you kind of got to work for the money. You got to work for the Bitcoin. And the computer works to do this, but when the Bitcoin relies on a blockchain sort of technology. So once you earn the Bitcoin, it's put in your wallet, and that wallet is recorded as a transaction in a dispersed way. So it's incredibly safe because you've got backups everywhere. So the way that I once saw this, there was like a right, is that you have these transactions, but the nature of the transactions are also stored elsewhere. Or probably as a nicer way to look at it, it looks like this. And so things are stored elsewhere. So just losing one thing, you don't lose the entire system. The entire system doesn't break down. Here's probably a better picture of the decentralized ledger. The reason why it's nice is that basically the network is the verifier of the transaction. So businesses obviously see a great need for such a technology, of a blockchain technology, which Bitcoin uses. But if we look at Bitcoin itself, which uses this blockchain technology, I think maybe the textbook's being a little bit pessimistic towards Bitcoin. I mean, the US dollar is, what, 230 years old? Bitcoin is a little over 10. I don't think we can say it's unlikely to become the money of the future. It very well may at some point. I don't know. I mean, it's just, the future is unpredictable in that kind of way. And I think the best thing you can do is just be prepared for things to change if needed. Think about the countries in Europe, right? The Dutch guilder, which was the currency of the Netherlands, previous to 2001, was a 500-year-old currency. 500 years. People around the world used the Dutch guilder. And the Dutch were known for basically being the bank to the rest of the world. It's what helped start the United States credit line back after the American Revolution. Our first loans were from the Dutch that we used to pay off the American Revolution. That's who lent us the money for the most part. And in 2001, it went away. And all of a sudden, it was the euro. The German mark disappears. Right? The French franc disappears. Right? Just go down the line, right? the currencies in Europe all disappear for the most part, with the exception of the Swiss franc, the British pound, which rejected joining this currency union. It went away. So I don't think necessarily the case that the US dollar is going to exist forever and all time. I think to do that would be foolhardy. That's my opinion. But you're free to disagree with me. Yell USA, USA as you're stating your belief there, but I just don't think there's any currency that's a forever currency. Now, how do we measure it? How do we measure money? We start by talking about something called M1. M1 is going to be the most liquid form of money. When we say liquid, we mean the fastest way for it to be cash. So M1 represents currency, which obviously is cash already. Traveler's checks. If you don't know what a traveler's check looks like, some of you have never seen one. Sorry, I'm like typing on my side here. I haven't used a traveler's check in a long time. It looks like this. American Express is the primary company that issues them. There's basically two signatures. You sign it when you get it, and then you sign it when you redeem it. That way the merchant basically knows that it's there, and it lists a currency that it can be exchanged for. And the merchant knows that it's going to be accepted. And it looks fancy, and it's got a whole bunch of anti-counterfeit nature to it. Traveler's checks. Demand deposits. That would be a deposit at a bank where you can immediately access the cash. And then, which would essentially be a demand deposit, would be basically a checking account is the most common example we see. And then adding to that other checkable forms of deposits. If we look at what the size of M1 is right now, it's obviously grown a great deal since the pandemic. Again, this is my clown. This is scary, scary, scary stuff. The solution to the pandemic, from an economic standpoint, was avoid an economic crisis and just flood the market with cash. Unprecedented. Again, this is my opinion, and as an economist, I guess I'm entitled to my opinion here. But we are in uncharted territory. And you can certainly see that here. Even during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, which caused an incredibly long recession, all you see here is a slight change in the slope. Nothing like this. I mean, look at that. How do we make sense of a world where the money supply has almost quintupled by a factor of 5? I don't know what that kind of world looks like, except scary. My long pauses are to emphasize to you the scariness of it all. Then we have M2. M2 is everything in M1 plus some things that are a little bit less liquid, like a CD, a savings deposit, money market accounts. That's actually pretty big. Money market mutual fund shares. Most of the time, when we're talking about how much money we have, most of the time we use M2, not just M1, because M1 is very liquid. M2 is still pretty liquid, and it's a broad form of the measure of money. And as you had seen here, even when it was kind of pre-filling in possible things here, it's a trending search term. And that's obviously going to be pretty big. Still increased quite a bit. So the M2 is higher because it includes everything in M1 plus some less liquid forms. And the whole nature of the stimulus during the pandemic was that a lot of cash was printed, basically, borrowed by the government and printed. And so it increased from 15 to 20. So it's still increasing by a third. Again, 2008, 2009 crisis, all you get is a very slight little change. Nothing like the pandemic. I don't want to really focus on this. You can click the link and you'll get the best data, the most up-to-date data. There's no point in remembering stuff like this. So M1 plus M2, and then you can even have M3, which is some things that are even a little bit less liquid. Policymakers, as this slide kind of points out here, most policymakers do generally focus on the M2. M1 is useful just to know how much could be immediately spent, how much could be immediately deployed in the economy. But for the most part, M2 is our useful measure of the economy and how much money exists. $4,500 in cash per person is out there right now in terms of circulation. How many dollars have been actually printed by the United States Bureau of Engraving and Printing? That the average person has $4,500. Dude, I don't know very many people who do. I think the book is a little bit dark when it just says it's criminals and foreigners. It's either, this is my opinion, it's pretty dated. It's a little bit xenophobic, meaning fear of the other, fear of, like, foreigner. I mean, this is such a, I'm not sure why they would write that. I certainly wouldn't write that. Who do I think is holding dollars? I mean, I think actually a great deal of dollars are actually being held by individuals that are not W-2 employees, but are 1099 employees, right, who are being paid in cash. Another source of the dollars would just be households planning for the fact that maybe banks could be shut down during the pandemic, or doomsday preppers, or, yeah, I'm sure there's criminal stuff going on too, but just to say foreigners, I mean, I'm not sure that that's the case. And that's not certainly how I would describe it. Again, M1 and M2. M2 contains M1 within it. Really what you're seeing here is a difference between individuals keeping their money a little bit less liquid versus keeping it liquid. And the big change you see here is that during the 2008-2009 crisis, individuals reacted by holding a bit more money in cash. Okay. That gives us all an overview now of what money is.